What's up, guys? Welcome to the Put Me In Coach podcast,
where we go beyond the headlines and deep dive everything NFL.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Andy.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. All right, man. Welcome. How are you?
What's happening? How we doing?
Not much. Man, we got an NFL blue blood today. We got an NFL blue blood.
We sure do. Shout out the Steelers. The Pittsburgh
Steelers. Yeah, you used to live in Pittsburgh for a while. You like that town.
Fun city, man. I got some true love for Pittsburgh. I got to go back.
Yeah.
Man. I haven't been since I left. It's such a fun city.
I had a great time visiting you.
Yeah. Man, boy, didn't we? That was a good little weekend. Yeah, that was fun.
We lived it up in Pittsburgh. This was a few years ago. It's probably been outlawed since. I feel like they were like the last bar in town to not outlaw, but we could smoke cigarettes inside the bar.
So elite.
That was a blast. That was a great place.
Shout out Sharpsburg. Shout out Sharpsburg, Pennsylvania. That's where that bar was. Remember we walked over to it. We was like a 2-minute walk from my apartment. And we paid what was this, $16 or something like that. And we ended up tipping the girl like $50 because we were like, "Are you not charging us for drinks?" She's like, "No, not really." I'm like, all right, cool.
Yeah, she was charging us for like every other drink, and we got so hammered.
Oh, we had like 10 drinks each.
That was crazy. I think that's conservative. Pittsburgh's an interesting city. It's a beautiful city. It's a hidden gem. Very, very, very passionate fan base, very historic, successful franchise, and suffering, I think, from a little bit of a case of an identity crisis right now, in my opinion.
Totally agree.
But, let's roll the clip and we'll come back on the other side and get into it. Okay, so, we do this every time. We do the last year recap. Weird season, surprisingly a playoff team last year. You finished 10-7, third in the AFC North. That's a gauntlet of a division. More on that later. Look, it was your 20th winning season in a row. You ended up losing wild card weekend 31-17 to Buffalo at Buffalo. You're never going to win that game. I mean, I think we all know that. But, getting to the playoffs last year with that team, particularly offensively, I think is worth upping. It was a good year based on what you actually had, right? I mean, you had a revolving door of Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph. Who do you feel like Mason Rudolph was the best quarterback on that team last year in a strange turn of events? Like at least I do.
He might have been low on the lowest of keys. He might have been. It's hard to say.
I feel like he was.
He's still
he kind of balled
he's still
a little
pretty
bit.
bad.
Yeah, it was Pickett. Pickett got hurt, then they went to Trubisky, then they went to Rudolph, and Rudolph was the most successful player out of all three of those, which is an indictment on your GM, maybe. We're going to get into some of these topics later on, kind of why these things have had to happen anyway for you to make the playoffs and have these, winning seasons. I say that in quotations. But we are going to get into it. I think, ending the year that way, firing your offensive coordinator towards the end of the year and kind of having an interim and having your third string quarterback and still making the playoffs. I do want to give a lot of respect to Mike Tomlin and the players for pulling that off. Does that make any sense? I think that despite my feelings about why you were there, I think the fact that you were there and you still made the best of it is really impressive.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah. So we come into this season. It's a weird vibe because I just mentioned three quarterbacks, and all three of those guys are elsewhere. I don't know if I actually didn't check if Trubisky was, but I know that Pickett's backing up Jalen in Philadelphia, and Rudolph is backing up Levis in Tennessee. You have 2 new quarterbacks. Russell Wilson being the first that you acquired via Denver.
Trubisky went back to the Bills.
That's what I thought. Okay. I didn't want to say it for sure because maybe he's still on the roster, but that makes sense. I mean, he was pretty much a failure in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But that seems right because he was a good backup for Josh a couple of years ago with Buffalo. So that fits. But, you gave up a 6th-round pick for Justin Fields after acquiring Russell Wilson, and that's a conditional 4th if Justin Fields plays 50% of the snaps. I don't think he will. But I wanted to pass it over to you because I guess in some ways this is kind of the most interesting development on a team that doesn't really shake things up very much, having 2 new quarterbacks. So where are you on this quarterback battle,
Sure.
if you will?
That's funny. I have battle in quotations here. I use the same exact word in my notes. It's not a battle. Russ is your starter. Russ is by far your better player. I think what I've realized in this research, but also just in like what I know, like eye test stuff, we've been just lied to by the media for the last year or so, right? It started with Justin Fields being an MVP candidate last year in Chicago. That was never going to happen. He's not that. And then also Russell Wilson being washed. Russ is Ross. No, I'm not really. He's washed in the sense that he's not the player he was in Seattle. But he's definitely not like garbage juice like the media sold us as well, right? Like we've heard that, he's garbage. They cut him. I don't even know if that was the right move, to be honest with you. I think Sean Payton just kind of hated him. Because he didn't really play that bad last year, frankly. I think Russell's guilty of not being worth the money that they paid for him, and also not being worth the assets that they gave up for him. He's definitely guilty of those 2 things. But to sit here and say that he's like a washed player is dishonest in itself. Last year, and we all remember the Broncos had a very up and down season, right? Started off pretty piss poor, and then as it went along, it gradually got better. Russell gave us 3,070 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and a passer rating of 98, right? So if you're to go through and break that down from like what we saw out of all the starters last year, he was top 10 in touchdowns. He was bottom 5 in interceptions, so he was protecting the ball really well. He was top 10 in completion percentage, and he was top 10 in passer rating. And I think that's like damning evidence, right? It's like, okay, you're top 10 and granted, he's like towards the bottom half. He's like 8 and 9 on all those lists. And there's context there that needs to be added too, right? Kirk Cousins missed most of the year. You have Joe Burrow missed most of the year. Justin Herbert got hurt towards the latter half of the year. So, if those guys all play healthy seasons, is he still top 10 in all these categories? Probably not, but it is what it is. He was top 10 in all those categories. So the idea that he's like the 25th, 26th best quarterback in the league, it's just untrue. He's like probably like 14th or 15th, if we're being like totally honest. I think that where, and I'll get into Fields in a sec. I don't have much to say on Fields, dude. I don't believe in Justin Fields. You know what? Screw it. I'll get into Justin Fields right now just because we just came off of those numbers, right? So you have, comparatively speaking, you have Justin Fields had the 20th most touchdowns, right in between 2 guys that I just named, Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow. They missed a majority of the season. He was 24th in passer rating. He was the 30th ranked for completions, and he had about 400 yards less than Russ did last year. And Russ did not have very good yardage. I think he was like 20th in yards last year. So, when you put those numbers together, I think Justin Fields is more of what you're trying to sell me that Russell Wilson is, to be honest with you. And I do understand like the athletic upside of Justin Fields. He's a flashy player. When given open field, he's really remarkable. And we've all seen it in Chicago over the last couple of years. He can really make some phenomenal plays. The problem is that he can never do it consistently, and he cannot read a defense for his life. He cannot see the field as a starting caliber NFL quarterback. He just can't. His footwork sloppy. He leaves so much to be desired, and I don't think Arthur Smith is the person to fix that in Justin Fields. There's a lot of other teams I really wish he would have gone to where I think he could be like an absolute weapon. Why, the New York Giants didn't call and offer that 6th pick will never make sense to me. The Miami Dolphins come to mind. Even like a Kyle Shanahan, right? Like just these offensive minds, you would think that they would go out and give up what is essentially nothing for Justin Fields. But the market was the market. That's what they wanted. And I know he turned down a bunch of trades, but that probably wasn't in his best interest, honestly. Like as a GM, Ryan Poles had to get what he could out of Justin Fields, right? But if you're turning down trade after trade after trade, at a certain point, you got to be like, hey, bro, I'm moving off of you for a reason. I could just be paying you, but you're not really that guy. So I guess here you go to Pittsburgh. But again, I think it was against his best interest. He should have gone to an offensive mind, not a defensive mind. But to stay on Arthur Smith and kind of get back to Russ real fast, Arthur Smith's going to run 12 personnel. That is what his offense is. That's what his offense has been, right? He's going to have 2 tight ends out there. He's going to go sideline to sideline, and that's where, and he's going to be super run heavy as well. That's where I think Russell is going to, we're going to see a big, I shouldn't say big, we're going to see a bit of a bounce back season from Russ. As I just said, he really wasn't that bad last year. That idea is kind of a lie. But I think with a system that kind of plays to his advantages, I mean, Russell still at age 35 has one of the prettiest deep balls in the game. And Arthur Smith loves running those play action deep balls. And when you look at a player like George Pickens, he's kind of the guy who can go get those 50-50 balls. George Pickens is like one of the best guys in the league when it comes to those. He doesn't create a ton of separation, but he can really go up and get those balls in particular. So I think this system is going to really fit what Russell Wilson does best. You're going to see a lot of like run, play action, or play action, run. It's not going to be this overcomplicated system that I think Sean Payton was trying to run last year. Sean Payton is a much better offensive mind than Arthur Smith could ever dream of being. And I think that's going to benefit Russ because I think his IQ when it comes to this game is a little overrated. I think he needs it dumbed down for him a little bit. And that's what he's going to get in Arthur Smith. So I think that is going to be a marriage that actually really works. You did go out and get Fashawn, or how do you say it? Troy Fatanu, I think is how you say it. He was a left tackle.
I'm not quite
Fontanu,
sure.
yeah, I'm not sure how to really say it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. You drafted him with 20th overall pick. He was a left tackle at Washington last year, really good, a little undersized for like the standard NFL left tackle. So I think he might move into guard. Not quite sure yet. I think you guys are going to try to figure that out. Because right now on the depth chart, he is the starting left tackle. But I know there was talk of him maybe going on the inside. Second round, you took Zach Frazier out of West Virginia. Just like a bull rusher, wrestler, backwoods, just like one of those prototypical offensive linemen, cornbread fed, just a mean brawler type guy. The offensive line is tough because it's so young. You took Broderick Jones last year, right tackle. He had some ups and downs throughout the season, as expected. I mean, rookie tackles, they usually struggle. That's, you're not everybody's going to be like a Penei Sewell, right, or a Tristan Wirfs. Like a lot of these guys do struggle. And I think we saw some flashes from Broderick Jones that really show what a high level player he can be. And I think we've seen things in college from these other two players that when you put them all together, there should be a good offensive line there, but they all have to gel. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't just say like, oh, this O-line is going to be a lot better because there's not really like a ton of veteran presence at the spots that matter, right? Zach Frazier at center, he's going to have to be your voice. He's going to have to be your alpha. It can't really be Russell Wilson because he might only be there for a year. It can't be George Pickens because who knows how long he's going to be there. Najee, same thing. You don't know how long these guys are going to really be there. But if Zach Frazier ends up being a really good center in this league, he's going to be in Pittsburgh for 15 years. So he right now kind of has to take that like offensive alpha I'm kind of the leader of this offense and really bring in those guys, Broderick Jones and Fontenot, and really say, hey guys, we're young. Let's gel. Let's get together. Let's get acclimated with each other. Let's really make sure that we're all in lockstep. And if he can do that, this will be a much improved offensive line. But it leaves a lot to be desired right now, just because I don't know what it is really going to be. And that kind of applies to the entire offense, to be honest with you, with everything that I just said.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well said. I mean, I think, if I may be so bold, well, just to unpack a little bit of what you said, because I thought it was brilliant. I think the stuff with Russ, I agree with you. I think the narrative the pendulum has swung so far in the narrative that it's now become untrue football takes about Russ. But where I will say I do push back a little bit on Russ still being good is just simply the eye test. I think that last year in Seattle and the last 2 years in Denver, I've seen a pretty much mediocre quarterback, if I'm being honest.
That's what he is.
Broncos.
He's very mid,
but he's not horrible.
Trash. That's where you know what I mean? That's where I say, that's not really true. I feel like Justin Fields is kind of trash. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I was thinking about this. We were listening to you talk about Russ and about Justin and kind of this breakdown, right? And I thought about it and I go, well, why are people with real credibility in the media, and I use the term loosely, but these are their jobs, right? Real sports writers, real reporters, real football analysts, and entertainment guys and fans, so interested and steadfast in this idea that Justin Fields should be the starter, when what you just laid out is clear. I didn't need to hear the numbers. I more agree with the Arthur Smith of it all, and the style of football that they're going to want to play. It's very obviously Russ, and the experience and the pedigree and the resume. I mean, it's not close. But I found myself wanting Justin to be the starter when it makes no sense and it has no reason to be. And I thought about this, and I thought, why would that be? The only answer I can come up with is because this team has lost its juice. There's no more excitement in Pittsburgh. And there hasn't been for a very, very, very long time. And I say very, very, very long time because in football years, it's like dog years, right? These things go by fast, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. It's a long time as a franchise to not have any juice going on in the building. And I think for me, it starts with the Tomlin of it all, right? To me, Mike Tomlin is a legend. We touched on Sean Payton a lot with the Broncos, and is it the right fit? Is it the right moment? This has nothing to do with my respect for Mike Tomlin and my belief that he is one of them dudes of our era as a head coach. The resume speaks for itself. I don't need to go through and point out what Tomlin has done and how successful he's been, right? He's got a Super Bowl ring. He's got no losing seasons. He's put together many great defenses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Rooneys decided to extend him 3 seasons last month. I noticed he signed a new extension that would keep him in a headset until 2027. And I thought that was an interesting move. And part of it has to do with kind of an overwhelming philosophy that I feel like has engulfed this organization in recent memory. And the only way I know how to put it is that sometimes, especially for us men, right? And that's all I can really relate it to. And I'm not a woman, so I can't quite put it in that context. But sometimes comfort is corrosive. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is comfort feels good. It's safe. The comfort zone is where all of us kind of choose to live our lives for long periods of time. But I find that the most growth tends to happen when we leave the comfort zone. I don't think that Mike Tomlin is a washed coach, but I really, really would have liked to see him pivot to a new situation after Ben retired. I think that the Rooneys have sent a message with this extension, and Mike Tomlin has sent a message with signing this extension that we're never going to be what the Lions have been in past seasons and the Texans have been in past seasons. But because of that, we're never going to be what the Lions and Texans are right now, which is exciting. Look, going through the recent resume of Mike Tomlin, he hasn't won a playoff game since the 2016 season. Each of the last 3 seasons in a row, they have a negative point differential. And of the past 6 seasons, 3 of them didn't include playoffs, and the ones that did include playoffs were all wild card losses. Look, for me, when we talk about Russ and we talk about Mike Tomlin, this is becoming an organizational identity crisis of comfort with mediocrity, comfort with same, comfort with safe. And I think the reason why fans want to see Justin Fields so badly, despite all of the evidence that you just laid out, which is completely correct, by the way, not even close, is because at least it's something. It's something to talk about. It's something exciting. Did you see what Justin did last week? You're going to be what you're going to be with Russell Wilson, and then what? That's my point on it. Look, I think you touched on Arthur Smith a bit. I want to unpack the hire a bit because the more I kind of look into the Steelers, the more I see that this is, for NFL fans, a very polarizing coach, a very hated coach. Look, he went 21-30 in Atlanta, right? And for those of you, he coached there for 3 years. Those of you who don't want to math, that's 7-10, 7-10, and 7-10. He walked in, they went 7-10. He got kicked out, they were 7-10. That's what he was. He was a failed head coach. He was criticized greatly, I think, for good reason, with the mismanagement of talent around Bijan, around Drake London, around Kyle Pitts, his inability to get the most out of those pieces. I think that the Tennessee stuff for me is kind of where he cut his teeth back in 2019 when he got hired, and the Tennessee offense was 10th in points per game and then 4th in points per game in those 2 seasons that he OC'd. But I think my issue with giving him a lot of credit for that is that in 2019, when he took over that gig, he was replacing Matt LaFleur, who I believe is one of the premier offensive coaches in this game right now. So I don't believe he was the architect of those things. And also, not to mention, he was working with A.J. Brown, and he was also working with pinnacle of his career, Derrick Henry. This Steelers team doesn't have anything like that, and their O-line isn't even as good as they were with the Tennessee Titans were with Taylor Lewan and those boys, right? So I don't think the Arthur Smith hire is a home run at all, but I don't think it's a disaster hire because he's taking over for Matt Canada, essentially, right? I know there was an interim last year for a few games after Matt got fired, but Matt has been there, the last 3 seasons. During those 3 seasons under Matt Canada, the team ranked 28th in points per game, 28th in yards per game, 30th in yards per play, 27th in red zone touchdown percentage, and 30th in first down conversion percentage. Part of my problem with this discovery, with drafting Kenny Pickett in the first round a couple years ago, when it was very clear he was a late second, early third round talent, and every single measurable about this guy's profile screamed backup. Where is he now? He's backing up Jalen Hurts after 2 seasons in the NFL. Drafting Najee Harris in the first round, who I do think is a good running back. I got respect for Najee's game. I don't think he's a slouch, but he's not a star. He's not explosive. He's got slow feet. He's got slow movement. He doesn't have great burst. He doesn't have great power. He's just a decent starting running back. Deontay Johnson being a wrinkle, and how do we blame, do we blame Omar Khan? He's only been there for a couple years. How far back do we go to really blame this situation? Who do we really blame in this situation, right? But I look at this roster, and you just touched on the O-line, right? I think the O-line got a lot better this year. Why has it taken 5 years? Ben was washed for 4 years. Where was your replacement when Ben was washed? I watched an all-timer be bad for 3 seasons in a row, if we're being all the way honest, and there was no backup. And it wasn't until he retired that you guys took an emergency pick on Kenny Pickett, who had no business getting drafted there. And then you look at Matt Canada's 3-year stint and you look at those numbers, and I watched this team a bunch, so I've watched the games unfold and how bad this offense has looked. I say all these things to say I could sit here and do a roster breakdown of the pieces, and I love Pickens, and I like Jalen Warren, and I think Najee Harris is a fine player. I'm uncomfortable with how comfortable the Pittsburgh Steelers have become with mediocrity. And I don't think Russell Wilson's the answer. I don't think Arthur Smith is the answer. And I'm not so sure that Tomlin's the answer anymore either. So, for me, you have an identity crisis. And I'm not sure in a division with the dynamic Lamar Jackson and the dynamic Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow and, a defense now in Cleveland that's been the big crown jewel of Pittsburgh, the defense. That defense is better than your defense now, in my opinion. It's close, but I think they're a little better. It's like the Office Space clip. What do you do around here? What is it that you do around here?
What would you say you do here?
I wonder the direction of this team at a time where you don't seem to have a franchise quarterback and you don't seem to have the answers on the coaching staff. And I wonder about Tomlin's future, not from getting fired, because I don't think he ever will, but for him. Can you do that next thing and get uncomfortable and be a great coach again? Because I believe that he's lost it in Pittsburgh. I think he's lost that juice that he had a decade ago, and I don't think this team has been exciting since Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown got shot out of a cannon. So that's my 2 cents on the offense and on the coaching and on everything. So I'm pass it over to you now.
Don't send that shit back to me after that. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's where I stand, man. I don't know. I got to keep it funky, man.
Here. Wow, fucking well said, sir. How am I supposed to follow that up with break down the fucking secondary? I can't follow it up.
Well, I can go first. I can break down the front seven because that is a fun unit. But
yeah.
Look. I mean, again, I don't mean to make it. I like to do roster breakdowns, and I'm a fan of Roman Wilson. They just picked him out of Michigan. I think he's a good slot receiver. I like George Pickens a lot, man. George Pickens has got talent. Where is it going? If Justin isn't the answer, who is? If Russell is even if Russell's good this year, what's next? Another year of Russell?
No, I'm with you.
He's going to be 37. I mean,
well, it's like what happens in
where's
what
it
happens. Going? Okay, so say Ben leaves in 21, you just commit to being asked for a year, right? Like they're just like, let's just roll with Mason Rudolph for one singular season. Now you're picking between, Bryce Young, you're picking between CJ Stroud, you're picking between Anthony Richardson, even Will Levis. All of those options would be better than what you have currently, in my opinion, because you have one year of a wash-ish Russell Wilson.
Yeah, but what about all the years that you had Ben there and you didn't?
No, I know, but I'm saying
like
then. even just like I was saying that when I was living there in 2016, they needed to move off Ben. It was so obvious. But there's this blind loyalty, and it's like it's much like we talked about in the. It's much like we talked about in the Patriots video, where it's like it's time to move on. Like, know when it's time to move on. I don't know if it's because it's the Rooney Rule and because you have Mike Tomlin as your head coach and he feels like he can't let go of him. But it's like, bro, for both of your careers, just let go of him. This is an offensive
league.
Same to
Mike.
No,
same to Mike.
That's what I say. For
Mike
both
is
of their
a vibe,
careers.
man. Mike is a vibe. And it's like, I want to see you go take on that next challenge. Go find that OC, buddy up with him. Like the Atlanta job. Like, can you bring Zach Robinson with you to Atlanta? Can you try that? Like, can we do 100%. A new I want a new hat on Mike Tomlin's head.
Yeah.
And they extended him 3 years. He's not leaving. And he's afraid of change. The Rooneys are afraid of change. This whole organization is afraid of being bad for a year or two, and I just don't know that they're ever going to pivot off of it. But it's frightening for me as a fan of great teams that I just wonder the direction, because this division is a gauntlet, man. And like, what's the big play? Like, again, it's not a knock on Russell Wilson. I think he's had a hell of a career, but is 3 years not good in a row like perceived washed Russell Wilson getting kicked out of Denver your answer? Or Justin Fields, who you gave up a sixth for?
It's a bad answer. They're two bad answers.
Right. It's a bunch of, I mean, they moved off of Deontay Johnson, so we'll see what happens at receiver. But I don't
Now they're talking about giving. Well, now they're talking about giving up draft capital to go get Brandon Ayuk, and it's like, why? If anybody can draft a receiver in the third round and make him an All-Pro, it's you guys. You know what I mean? Like, you've done it time and time and time again. I mean, Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant for a second there, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens was a second rounder. I mean, even I wouldn't surprise me if Roman Wilson was really good this year. They know how to evaluate wide receivers, but now it's like, oh, we're gonna go get Brandon Ayuk. Like, why? Because he looks like your head coach. It's weird. You know what I mean?
Who?
Like, this.
Well, for who? Who's he for? I mean, I don't understand why Buffalo would go make that move. I understand why Washington, frankly, would go make that move. But you're dealing with two rental players that you're.
Russ.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think, like I said,
Russ.
I think Russ is better than he's given credit for still, and I think you laid that out beautifully. But I just wonder what the answer is. Even if Russ is good this year, what then?
But how good is he going to be? He's going to be just good enough to win you, 8-9 games and not get a quarterback next year.
And so it goes.
You're not better off. You're not better off tanking this year and getting tanking a flyer on Quinn Ewers. You're not better off doing that.
I think they believe organizationally, it's an ethos there. Frankly, it's this dated blue collar thing. I think I don't mean to be disrespectful.
I wish they would just have a losing season.
It's a dated idea. It's a dated idea of we win no matter what we play. It's like you got to rebuild, man. So
you're not winning though. You're not winning things that matter. Going to the playoffs and getting mollywopped in the wild card round is not winning. It's just demoralizing. You're in purgatory.
Which is all it's been for a decade. Be honest with yourselves, Jackson.
100%.
Steelers fans. I do want to pivot to a very different vibe, if you will. Defensively, which is what this team, has been really kind of throughout its history, but especially kind of since, the Le'Veon, Ben, AB trio broke up, and it's
Killer Bees.
The Killer Bees, right? I mean, we're back to being a pure defensive team that's going to carry you to a certain amount of wins. And when you go through this defensive roster, it makes sense why this team is still winning games despite the offensive statistics that I pointed out earlier. Getting into the front seven, I mean, let's start with the reason that we all are still watching this team, frankly.
That's real.
TJ Watt.
Mr. TJ Watt.
Look,
come on now.
There's not a lot to say. I mean, I'll leave it at this, essentially. TJ Watt is so good that JJ Watt is his brother and doesn't overshadow him.
Yeah.
It's really unreal. I mean, to me, we talked about Myles Garret. We talked about Max Crosby. It's those three in a tier with, I think, Nick Bosa can sit there with those four. It's like those four guys, and then it's a tier break, right? He's unreal. He can wreck a game anytime. I mean, he won Defensive Player of the Year in 21. He was first-team All-Pro last year. He's one of the best defensive players in football, and I love watching him. So that's my take on TJ Watt. And what's great about this front seven defensively is that they have a guy opposite TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith who, for all my marbles, might be the most underrated edge in this league. They signed him in 2023 to a 4-year, $68 million deal for good reason. He had a huge breakout last year. He's incredibly versatile. He plays a lot like TJ does, but just not quite as good because TJ is a borderline Hall of Fame talent, right? But he does everything. He rushes the passer. They can drop him in coverage. He can stop the run. He's got great strength, great speed. And, I think Alex Highsmith has proven to be a great addition to this team and has been a big reason why this front seven is carrying momentum because he can kind of carry the load when TJ is banged up or anything. You bring Cam Hayward back. Look, I can keep going. I'm going to continue to glaze this front seven because it's such an unreal roster, but you know what he is. I mean, Cam Hayward has been really an elite interior defensive lineman since he entered the league, and it hasn't slowed down. He hurt his groin in week 1 of last year, and he had to get surgery. So he only played 11 games last year, and at 35, I have some concerns with the age and with the fact that he's been a bit of an Iron Man, and last year, like, immediately got hurt in week 1. But if he's healthy, he's on the field, everybody watching this knows exactly who that man is. Speed, strength, power, all of it.
What about when you come up against him? What then?
I'll fight harder, I always have.
Take a look. His speed, his ferocity, his training. I see the power of belief.
A guy that I'm interested in seeing take a leap this year, who I think may, is Keanu Benton. They took him in the 2nd round last year from Wisconsin. He's 6'4", 319. He didn't play all their snaps last year, but I think this year at that kind of interior, they run a weird system, so it's hard to say if he'll be a nose tackle, but he'll be an interior defensive lineman. He's got a lot of speed for a guy that size. He's not a pure run stopper. He can rush the passer. He's got a great club move. I think that he could be like a breakout interior D lineman this year, especially if Cam Hayward misses some time and he gets highlighted a bit. But playing next to those guys, I think it's a huge benefit, and I'm a huge fan of what he does. And then, there's a couple other guys, but the main guy I wanted to touch on, I think before this, I pass it back to you to talk about the secondary, is Patrick Queen. The reality is, since the Ryan Shazier situation, they haven't really had a great linebacker. Like a pure kind of middle linebacker guy with a green sticker who can really run the position at a high level. They've been trotting out mid, I think. Signing Patrick Queen from Baltimore makes all the sense in the world to me. We know what he is. He's not an elite run defender. He's not consistent every play. He can get got. But any given Sunday, he can play up there with the top brass of linebackers. He had 133 tackles last year. He gambles. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think it was clear when Baltimore brought in Roquan Smith that they weren't going to pay Patrick Queen the money that they needed to retain his services. And I think Khan and the Pittsburgh Steelers did a great job of calling gimmies. He's not an elite player, but he's really good. I think the reason why we dismiss Patrick Queen a bit has to do with the situation. Picked in the 1st round, Baltimore Ravens, off the heels of Ray Lewis retiring not that much earlier, 5-6 years earlier. I think, especially coming off that LSU championship team, I really think that people wanted Patrick Queen to be like a star player, and he's just not that. But he's a damn good linebacker, and I think that he's going to make a huge difference. And, the big knock I have that I hear a lot with Patrick Queen is like, well, what's he going to do now that he's not playing next to Roquan? I think he's going to be fine playing behind Cam Hayward and playing next to TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. So I'm not worried about Patrick Queen at all. That's good company. I think, again, with this front seven, you go through the list, you look at these players. It's something that Pittsburgh does while they're sleepwalking. My whole entire life, they've had a good front seven. This is no exception. This is one of their best units that they've had. And I think this team is going to, for better or for worse, keep them in ball games all season long. And I think they're going to win a lot of games that you don't think they're supposed to win. And if anybody's wondering why they're still winning these games, especially watching their offense last year, it's these guys. So that's it, man. And I'll pass it over to you for the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, well said. They're really good. That front seven's nasty. I think the secondary is going to be more of why you're going to see. It's more of the reason where Cleveland separates themselves. You're not quite as good as them. To me, it has to do with what I was kind of finding on the secondary. Your cornerback one is Joey Porter Jr., right? Steelers fans, let's remove the name real fast. Let's just take away the emotional hold that we have on that name real fast. How good is the kid? And that's not to say how good can he be, but how good is he right now? Do you truly believe he's a cornerback 1? Because I don't. I don't think he's a cornerback 1. I think he's a cornerback 2 masquerading as a 1. And that's an ugly position to be in when you're heading into a season. He's young, so I can give him that. I can give him the leap, but yeah, he really struggles with penalties, zone coverage, and tackling. If those aren't the 3 things that a true lockdown wide or cornerback 1 needs to have in the arsenal, I don't know what to tell you. Those are the things he really struggles with the most, and that's what keeps me from thinking, man, if you brought in a high end 1, that could be a nasty little duo back there, but you have him as your 1, so I don't know. It leaves a lot to be desired. I think he can make a leap over the next couple of years to be an elite piece, but I don't see that leap happening right now in this moment.
Reminds me of Asante Samuel in
yes.
I mean, not obviously the father-son thing excluded. Like,
yeah,
just the dynamic of like what they want versus kind of like what they actually are. Like they're very, very talented 2s to me.
Yes, I totally agree. Going to your 2, I mean, you bring in Dante Jackson. He's a guy. He's just a guy. He's a jag. There's a guy from the Deontay Johnson trade. Carolina sent him over. That should really be enough for you. Carolina sent him over. He doesn't have like the physical traits that you really want out of a cornerback. But he does have high-end speed, like a ton of high-end speed, but he's not physical even kind of. So coming into a city like Pittsburgh with a defensive history like Pittsburgh and not being a physical player, I don't see that meshing well. When I was kind of doing my research and trying to find out more on him, it seemed like every complaint was that all Panthers fans felt like he faked injuries last year. Like he would get just absolutely cooked on a route, and then all of a sudden his knee was hurt or his toe was hurt. He'd have to sit out a play, and it was kind of like, all right, dude, I don't know. It's not.
It's like a Key and Peele sketch.
It's like I'm not really buying that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, you bring back Cam Sutton. As a Lions fan, as a diehard Lions fan, I'm sorry. As a team, as somebody who is an ally of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think that you probably have your actual cornerback 2 in Cam once he's off suspension. He was pretty good for you guys a few years ago before he signed with us. I think we took him out of role. We wanted him to be a cornerback 1 that he was never supposed to be. I think you guys, if I'm correct, used him more as a nickel, and I think that's really where he's going to be good at. He's a physical player, but he's just not a guy who can go hang with the best of the best, right? He's not going to go hang with Jamar Chase or Zay Flowers or whoever, right? Whoever, Amari Cooper, right? He's just not going to hang with those guys. So, in a nickel maybe, but I think he's out for 6 weeks. So that's almost half the season, right? It's like, what are we doing here? Jumping over to your safeties, you have Minkah Fitzpatrick. Anytime you can have a top 5 player at his position, you're winning there. Had kind of like a down year last year due to some nagging injuries. I think he'll bounce back. I think he'll be back to top 5 form yet again. I'm not worried about him. There's not much you have to really say. Then you have Deshaun Elliott, who another former Lion, except for he was really good for us. He kind of embodied what Detroit was trying to do, especially in that 2022 season. Hard hitter, tough player, played with a lot of grit, if you will, given the whole mantra of Detroit. And I think those mantras within Detroit and the city of Detroit and the city of Pittsburgh, it's very similar, right? We're both kind of Midwestern towns, a lot of like blue collar toughness, automotive and like coal miners. It's like, steel miners. It's all that like kind of tough industrial stuff. Similar vibe. So I think he'll translate really well. He was out in Miami last year. He had a pretty good season. He was, whatever he had. I think he had 15 games last year, 82 tackles, an interception, and a career high 7 pass defenses. That's a good player. He's not an all-pro. He's not a top 30 safety in the league, but he's a solid number 2. And And that's really all I got for it. And I mean, I know you have some more pieces on there, but I felt like those were the ones worth mentioning. And I think ultimately it leaves a lot to be desired. There's not a, Minka's great, but he's a safety. I'd love to see Minka paired with like a high end number 1 cornerback, and then you move Joey Porter over to your number 2, and then now I think you're cooking with gas. Yeah, you don't need to bring in Pat Surtain, right? Just bring in a guy who's decent. I mean, Carlton Davis would have been a great pickup for you guys. He's somebody who comes to mind who was available, right? You got Carlton Davis at 1, Joey Porter at 2. Now we're cooking. But instead, you're kind of rolling with a sophomore at the 1 position, and everything else is a big question mark. So I don't know. I think this is really where that defense differentiates from really good to great, and it's primarily the secondary.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's the 3rd best that we've covered. Cleveland and New York are kind of in their own, and the difference is the secondary combined with the front 7. But the reality is that, this train is not powered by coal or gas or electricity. It's powered by this front 7. This is the team. This is what you're hoping really takes you home. And I guess that brings me to the perfect segue, which is it enough this year? Are the additions, are the signings, looking at this roster, bringing back Tomlin, bringing in a new OC, where do you have our boys in black and yellow this year?
I have you in 4th place for the first time in the AFC North's existence. And you'll find a way to evade it somehow. Somebody will get hurt. But I think you guys have been really lucky over the last couple of years with Burrow injuries, with Deshaun Watson injuries, with nagging Lamar Jackson injuries. I think you guys have kind of avoided these arrows that are coming at you, and I think it's time for you guys to kind of die almost. You know what I mean? Like the sword has to go through. I'm leveraging my body into it. I'm pushing it through and I'm twisting it. I need you guys to come in 4th, and I need you to burn this down and start over. And coming in 4th to you guys is probably like 8-9 wins even. He probably will still keep his winning record, and you might even make the playoffs. You might even sneak into the playoffs as a 4th place team. I know it's pretty unheard of, but you snuck in there as a 3rd place team last year who everybody could see was not good. The problem that I think I have mainly when it comes to Pittsburgh this year is your your week 10 to week 18 is so brutal. It's so brutal. You have a bye week in week 9. You have a week 10. You play the Commanders. So that should be like a nice acclimated, let's get reacclimated type game. I don't think the Commanders are going to be world beaters this year, but from there on out, you play the Ravens, the Browns, the Bengals, the Eagles, the Ravens, the Chiefs, and then the Bengals. Whoa. I mean, barring like a Burrow injury or like a Lamar injury, that's a rough schedule. I mean, just quarterbacks. You're facing Lamar Jackson twice. You're facing Deshaun Watson. You're facing Joe Burrow twice. You're facing Jalen Hurts and then Pat Mahomes. I just got done saying how your secondary was not very good. That's a gauntlet that you have to go through at the end of the year there.
Yeah.
And that's not to say you don't trade for somebody halfway through the season and maybe address that position, but I just don't see it. I think it has to come to an end at some point. It has to come to an end. And I kept trying to tell myself, okay, who's going to get hurt? Is it a Lamar season where Lamar gets hurt and the Ravens fall off, or is Deshaun Watson gonna completely poop his pants and just be terrible again? And that wouldn't surprise me. And I don't think the Browns are like leaps and bounds better than you guys. But I do know that like the Ravens with a healthy Lamar and the Cincinnati Bengals with a healthy Joe Burrow are leaps and bounds better than you guys. So could you jump into the 3rd spot and the Browns fall apart, or maybe Burrow gets hurt again, or maybe Lamar gets hurt again? It's totally possible. I mean, I'm not here to like plant flags on anything. That's just what my gut is telling me, that it's time for you guys to lose this division, and there needs to be some changes that happen from the top down. I don't care that you just paid him a 3-year contract. Get rid of him. for your own good, for his own good. Burn it down. Start over. Tank fully. I don't know. I don't know what you want from me.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really follow that up, man. I think for me, the biggest indictment in everything you just said is sort of like, I think your path towards success in this division is 3 franchise quarterbacks in your division all getting hurt.
100%.
That is
what
sort
it
of
is.
like that sort of sums it up, right? It's like we don't believe that with Madden roster injuries turned off that you can compete for this division.
No, you can't.
And the gauntlet that you laid out is really worth mentioning because, last year in week 12, they won a game against Cincinnati 16-10. That was with the backup. Then they lost 3 straight to Arizona, New England, and Indy. So you got a big scheduling break there, and then you lost all 3 of those. And then you won 3 straight against Cincinnati with a backup. And then you went back-to-back at Seattle and at Baltimore and actually won those 2 games to close the season out. But those were one-possession wins that you eked out at Seattle and at Baltimore. Yeah. I don't think the football gods are going to be so kind to you this year. So, to make it short, because I think you did a great job summarizing, I think I'm with you. I have them as a winning record, 9-8, 4th place team, and I hope I'm wrong. I would like to see some Justin Fields this year. That's not me wishing injury on anybody. I hate that, but just to feel something again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
I think that Le'Veon, that Le'Veon
give me a reason
Ben,
to watch you guys.
Yes, and again, I'll leave you with this. This is my final take. I read you off the statistics of the last 3 seasons of this team offensively. In the calendar year 2024, in the National Football League, you cannot get away with bottom 5 offense year in, year out, year in, year out. And that's what you've been for the last, frankly, 4 or 5 seasons almost. So I don't think you can win with this. I don't think it's enough. I think you'll win some games because this front 7's so dominant, because Tomlin's a good coach. You won't be bad, and I don't think you're going to be very good. That's where I view it. I think, like I said earlier, it's time to get out of the comfort zone. All right. Man, they're going to hate us for that one. All right. Like, comment, subscribe, guys.
Love us, you know what I mean? Let's be honest, guys. Let's be honest here. We're not wrong.
Yeah.
We're not wrong.
We're doing our honest politics.
We are right.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's
Julian, I know you feel us.
Yeah, we have a friend named Julian who's a big Steelers fan. Look, the thing is, we're always going to come on here and be honest. That's it. That's what we're doing every single time. So everyone's into this like brand thing. Like, what's your brand? Yeah. Our brand is just honesty. Like, that's it. Honesty. We're going to keep doing this every single time. We'll deal with the blowback. We'll deal with the disagreements. In fact, we like hearing them. We live for the comments. So that's kind of it. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Andy, peace out, brother.
Peace.
Take